Okay, so we are starting Far Journeys today. The book is by Robert Monroe. This is his second book. And we'll start with the chapter called Prologue.
There seems to be an easy way to do and a hard way. Given the choice, all of us take the easy route simply because it's more efficient, saves time and energy. If it's too easy, some of us feel guilty. We get the uncomfortable sense that we're missing something if we don't go the laborious, tried and true pattern. If it's that easy, it must not be good, might even be sinful.
Now, this is a question that I'm repeatedly asked when I tell people that in the excursion, what took me 25 years to do, you achieve it in 2 days' time. You have that experience in 2 days' time. So many people come back and tell me that that is not fair. If you want to achieve something, you want to achieve spiritual awakening or a spiritual connection, you have to go through the rigors, otherwise it is not valid. Okay, so this is something that always comes up. But in my view, whatever I have learned about spirituality, I find that if you can genuinely connect, it needs to be effortless, not effortful. And that's what we are constantly talking about in awareness, that whatever we do, it should happen automatically. We come back to the 4 S's that we talk about from the Gita sessions. The 4 S's are, the first is Swata. That means it comes itself into your life. You're not making any effort to bring it into your life. Next is Sahaj. It means that it is easy for you to do. Now, if it is easy for you to do, it is automatically effortless. Shresht, that it is the best thing, it is for the highest good of all concerned. And third is highest good, and fourth is that you accept it. Now, if I don't accept something, then automatically it becomes effortful. So if someone says that no, you have to go through the rigors, otherwise you're not going to be able to achieve, then they're not accepting that I can make a connection like that. So if you want to achieve anything, what I've seen in my own life, that all these 4 S's have to work, and you'll find that the best of things in your life come automatically. You really don't plan for it, and you really don't push it. It happens on its own.
After a while, the easy way becomes the ordinary way and we forget the old road. When you lived in an area long enough to have traveled between two cities before the interstates and freeways were built, try the old familiar highway just once. You'll find once is enough. The start and stop congestion, the total disorder, the growing frustrations far overshadow any remaining nostalgia you may have harbored. You have enough of such local traffic at the beginning and end of each run on the interstate.
So again, when we start, like when the old roads were there, the interstate wasn't there, right? Now, when I create a new neural pathway in my brain, then the old way is not used anymore. So if I have a circuitous route and I have a straight route, the straight route becomes easier and more efficient for me to use. Now, life is becoming more and more chaotic, more and more stressful. So the less clutter we have, the better it is for us. So it becomes very important to get the chaff out of the way and focus on what is really genuine. And that is what this process that we are using in the Monroe process actually allows us to hit the nail on the head like that.
Now, the problem. Suppose you met someone who had never driven on an interstate. All his life, he has driven only in local traffic. He's heard about such superhighways. He might even have seen one from a distance or heard the rumble of vehicles or smelled the exhaust fumes. He rationalizes any number of reasons why he hasn't and won't go interstate. He doesn't need to. He's satisfied the way he is. They travel too fast, so it's not safe. You have to go out of your way to get on it. It's full of strangers from all over the place, so you don't know whom you'll meet, so you can't trust them. Your car isn't in very good condition and it might break down and leave you stranded without anybody to help in some lonely spot you never heard of. Maybe sometimes you'll try it, but not right now.
So again, it's a fear of the unknown. Now you are now in this example, the fellow is very, very clear about only the local roads. He has never tried the freeway. So if you've not tried something, you are making excuses as to why you are not going to try it. So again, the question comes, when was the last time you did something new? Right? So if I'm not willing to stretch my boundaries, then naturally my growth will get restricted. So if I don't have a plan in place, if I'm not willing to step out, I'm not willing to take a risk, I'm not going to be able to grow. I'm not saying take astronomical risks, but at least take a step out of your comfort zone. That is what they're talking about here.
Suppose you happen to see a construction order from the State Highway Department to begin demolition of the old highway so that all local traffic will have to go interstate eventually, like it or not. What do you do? What would you do? Nothing. Suppose the recalcitrant is an old and dear friend, then what? Your friend knows of the order but refuses to believe it. He can see the work crews beginning to form at the end of the old highway and he ignores their existence. Thus, you know the intense trauma he will undergo when the old road is shut off and he will be carried kicking and screaming onto the interstate.
So, what he's saying over here, that at times, if you're not willing to bend or you're not willing to change, the change will be forced on you. And then it can become a very, very traumatic situation. There is this book called Who Moved the Cheese? Okay. It's a very thin book. I think we can go through it very quickly also after we finish this book. It talks about two mice where one mice is willing to get out of his comfort zone and investigate new pathways, whereas one mouse is only willing to travel one path. So the story goes that they find a big hoard of cheese in a maze. Now, one of the mice is staying in that particular horde and not going anywhere else. And the other mice is looking for other hordes and other pathways all the time. Now, what will happen to the mouse who has stayed in one place only? After some time, that cheese is going to get over. Now he has nothing else to do. Whereas the mice who has been stepping out of his safety zone and investigating other places has many other places to go to. So again, the idea here is to step out of our comfort zone.
You decide to do something, anything you can. After your decision, weeks, months, years pass due to your own inertia. You have your own rationale. You don't know how to proceed. You don't know how to describe the interstate in local traffic terms, and your dear friend understands only local traffic. Someone else will come along and do it for you, for your friend.
So
Finally,
he will ultimately be pushed into it by someone or the other.
finally, finally, you discover the stupidly simple answer. You and your friend suffer from the same affliction, but from different causes. It is inertia. Back in the old railroad days, a locomotive could pull only 4 or 5 cars at a time because if more cars than that were added, it would simply spin its drive wheels trying to get started. Inertia. Then a smart young thinker came along and invented the sliding coupler, which let the locomotive pick up the slack and inertia one car at a time. Ask any freight conductor what it was like to be in a caboose on the tail end of a 100-car train when he highballs the engineer. Instantaneous 0 to 30 miles per hour. It's the same with automobiles. The transmission is there to provide big torque in low gear to overcome inertia. Once underway at cruising speed, power is required only to overcome wind resistance and road friction, and very little of it relatively. The hard case is the catapult launch on an aircraft carrier, which does the job in a hurry and not too gently. Guns are inertia overcoming devices for bullets.
So what is he talking about here? In the olden days, if there were cars in a rail in a train, they all had to start together, right? Now the engine did not have enough power to add another vehicle because they all had to be pulled together. Now in the coupling system, if you've ever sat on a train, there is a coupling system between the two bogies, and there is a play in the coupling. So what happens is that the first when the engine starts, the first car is started, and it has no weight of the cars behind it. Now once the first car has started, the second car gets engaged, the second bogie gets
Bogey.
engaged, and it gets pulled. Then the third gets engaged, then the fourth gets engaged, so that the engine, the locomotive, does not have to start the whole train together. Okay, it starts one bogie at a time. This is what he's saying over here. Like, even in the vehicles, in the cars, when you're driving in first gear, you can't go very fast, right? But the pressure to start, now suppose you put your car into fourth gear and you try to start the car, it will not. To run the car, you'll have to press the accelerator a lot, press the clutch very softly, etc., to start the car. But in first gear, you don't have to do that, right? Now suppose you've reached a particular speed, then in gear 6 or gear 5 nowadays, in the cars that you have, there is hardly any fuel consumption because power is not required. The car is already cruising. This is the example he's giving here.
It's doubtful that explosive or catapult methods to full speed interstate in a different form will be less than confusing and bewildering, even with modification to local track standards. Take this as an illustration. I can't get the stuff under a null point. There ought to be a better way to do this. Your uncontrolled emotion of anger is using much of your energy, a very human response. A
Okay.
better way to
So
do it.
over here, what is he saying? That today, if you have anger, which side of the grid are you in? You're on the left side. So you cannot do anything when you are angry because manifestation cannot take place when you're on the left side of the grid. So it's clearly over here you're using too much of energy in the process of anger. So you will not be able to do anything.
A better way to do it, stuff can't help being what it is. You kick a stone in your path and it hurts your toe. Why get angry at the stone? You can't be angry at it for being on the path or being harder than a toe. Yes, now let's see if it works. It is focus of attention of consciousness, which is without diversion or deviation. No other energy available to you as human is as powerful. As a lens will direct energy you call light, so you can use consciousness.
So what state of consciousness are you operating from? Where are you operating from? If I can, if I can connect with that state of consciousness which can give me focused attention, or that state of consciousness which can totally relax me, or that state of consciousness that can put me to sleep, and I connect with it genuinely, then I can achieve lot more than what I would do if I'm not connected to that state of consciousness and I'm all over the place. So the idea with the Monroe process is to focus your attention and your concentration like a laser beam. Now, let us say that you have a light bulb. Okay, the light that is radiated, or the energy which is radiated by the light bulb, can only light up a room. Now, that same amount of energy, if it is focused and concentrated, it becomes a laser beam. And that laser beam can actually cut through a plate of metal. Why? Because it is focused.
Each time I hear something like that, I realize how far I have to go. You are doing very well, Mr. Monroe. Your own recognition of such precepts is an indication.
So
Hey, I got it.
this is what is happening here is a dialogue with someone else, right? So someone is making these comments to Robert Monroe.
Hey, I got it. It's under the baseline. Except for this one sore tooth. Can't seem to hold onto it. And there's a smaller waveform on the sawtooth. Can't get it put away.
Okay, so again, he's talking about making a connection with some kind of a message that he is getting. So he is calling it a sawtooth. To the saw has these teeth, which can be representative of a waveform. Whenever we talk about a frequency, we talk about a wave, right? So that is looking like a sawtooth, a saw. He's just making a analogy. Sorry.
It is another form of rote, as you call it. Take it if you so desire. It may be interesting to you.
Okay, so
Sure, why not?
rote means resonant, organized thought, energy. So when we go in, we've spoken about this before, when we go into an expanded state of consciousness, at times there is a download which takes place. And that download takes place in the form of a rote. And at times the rote can take some time to unravel. So you'll start seeing a part of it, and then the rest will slowly start to come over it. And this can happen a lot when you click out. Okay, you get a lot of rotes when you click out. Liuji in his talk the other day was saying that when you click out, a lot of brainwave activity is taking place, right? What that means is that the brain is actually processing more data in the click out state. Many of you have done the excursion workshop, so you know what the click out is. A click out is a state when you are not able to process things consciously, and it gets processed at a subconscious level. That results in extra brainwave activity in the click out state of consciousness.
Click. Going from local traffic to interstate does indeed require an entry or acceleration lane to merge into the flow. If you can make the tools supplied by local traffic apply in the design and building of the ramp, so much the better. You need to remember, especially the inertia factor. Pick up the slack on one loaded car at a time. Start in low gear so you don't stall the engine. Then shift smoothly. Automatic transmissions don't know when you need to shift. If the design is correct, your friend is cruising along the interstate long before the old highway is closed down. You do the best you can. Robert A. Monroe, Faber, Virginia, 1985.
So what he's talking about here is that you need to adjust, you need to do trial and error, and then you need to get used to the expanded states of consciousness that you're going to be experiencing in the process. So it's like driving on the road. If I'm used to driving in the local traffic, and then suddenly I come into the state highway speed is much more than the local traffic. And then if I go into the freeway, the speed is even higher. So I need to develop the ability to run or to drive my car in these various traffic conditions.
1. Old local traffic. If there is a first and obvious point to be made, I can report that I am still alive physically after 25 years of exploring personally the out of body experience. A little time worn, but still more or less operational. There were several moments when I was not so sure. However, some of the best medical authorities have assured me that the physical problems I have encountered have been simple cause and effect of living in the culture civilization of mid 20th century America. Some take another position. I am still alive as a result of such OOBE activity. Take your pick.
So again, there's always a counter opinion about everything. But having said that, he actually lived a very, very full life. And to be frank with you, he attributed a lot of what he was about to his out of body experiences, what he learned in those experiences, what he experienced in those experiences.
If there is a first and obvious point to be made, I can report that I am still alive physically after exploring 25 years of exploring personally the out of body experience. A little time worn, but still more or less operational. So it would seem that one can practice going out of the body regularly and survive. Also, after having been tested periodically by experts, I can still make the statement that I am reasonably sane in a not so reasonably sane world. There are many people who do strange things and get away with it. A century ago, it might have been going over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
So again, going out of body is a safe process. Anyone who goes out of body ultimately comes back. And this we are experiencing over and over again in the programs.
What is the out of body experience? For those who have not encountered the subject as yet, an out of body experience, OOBE, is a condition where you find yourself outside of your physical body, fully conscious and able to perceive and act as if you were functioning physically, with several exceptions. You can move through space and time slowly on apparently somewhere beyond the speed of light. You can observe, participate in events, make willful decisions based upon what you perceive and do. You can move through physical matter such as walls, steel plates, concrete, earth, oceans, air, even atomic radiation without effort or effect.
So basically, when you are in and out of Shivangla, your mic, basically, when you are in an out of body state of consciousness, you are literally as if you are in your physical body, but you can do things in that state of consciousness that you would normally not be able to do in your physical body, right? So you can move through, you can push your hand through a wall, you can actually just intend to be somewhere and you will be there like that. Okay, so all those things can start happening in an out of body state of consciousness.
You can go into an adjoining room without bothering to open the door. You can visit a friend 3,000 miles away. You can explore the moon, the solar system, and the galaxy if these interest you. Or you can enter other reality systems only dimly perceived and theorized by our time space consciousness.
So basically, you can be anywhere that you want to be.
It is not a new phenomenon. Recent surveys indicate some 25% of our population remembers having at least one such experience. Man's history is full of reports of such events. In earlier literature, it was commonly labeled astral projection. I began by refusing to use this term, as it had an occult connotation and was certainly non scientific by our standards. Charles Start, a psychologist friend, popularized the term out of body experience when we were working together in the 60s. In the past 20 years, it has become the accepted Western generic term for this particular state of being.
So,
Without any,
so Charles Start was one of the foremost people of who are exploring consciousness. And what happened was, talked about this last time also, that Robert Monroe, when he started having his experiences in 1951, he started maintaining a diary. And then one fine morning or one fine period, he had to go to the hospital for an operation. So he wanted his diary to be kept safe. So he gave his diary to Charles Start, saying that keep this safe. When I come back, you please give it back to me. Right now, when Robert Monroe came back home from his operation, he asked Charles Start for his book, his diary back. Charles Start said that now it is being published as a book. So Charles Start was a published author. He had a publisher and everything. He was a very popular man at that time. So he got his publisher to publish Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, which came out in 1970. Okay. That is when the entire game started happening. After the book was published and it became a bestseller, it's still a it's still one of the most popular books on out of body exploration.
without any obvious reason, I began to go out of my body in the fall of 1958. In the light of later historical events, it is important to state that no drugs or alcohol were involved. I was a non user of the former and an infrequent imbiber of the latter. Several years ago, I attended a conference not too far from our former home in Westchester County, New York, the site of my first out of body experiences. As we drove by the house, I commented that the reason why they began was still obscure. A psychologist friend riding with me took one long look at the house, turned and smiled. The answer is easy. It's the house. Take a good look at it. I stopped the car. The house looked the same, green roof and stone. The new owner had maintained it nicely. I turned to my friend. I don't see anything different. The roof, he pointed a finger upward. It's a perfect pyramid. Moreover, it's covered with copper, just like the tops of the big ones in Egypt before the looters took over. I stared dumbfounded. Pyramid power, Robert, he went on. You've read about it. You were living in a pyramid. That did it.
So now this was the opinion of this person, but there were two stories going around. One was that he started experimenting with sleep learning to use his radio stations. Okay. And the other was this pyramid theory. The fact is that it happened to him. That's all.
Pyramid power? Well, maybe. There are reports and books that make claims about strange energies therein. That the outer body experience frightened me then is a quantum understatement. When it recurred, I was filled with panic driven visions of brain tumors and oncoming insanity. This led to extensive physical examinations, all negative, followed by recommendations of psychotherapy for minor hallucinatory dysfunction. I discarded this diagnosis automatically. Some of my best friends at the time were psychiatrists and psychologists with their own problems, albeit certainly more orthodox.
So when he first started having these out of body experiences, he was really, really frightened. Why was that? Because it was unknown territory. He had no information or knowledge about it. So it really, really frightened him in the beginning.
Instead, I stubbornly began a search and research into the phenomenon out of self preservation, and as the fear and panic subsided, out of growing curiosity. The trail took me beyond conventional scientific circles, total rejection. Religions is the work of the devil. Parapsychology, interesting, sorry, no data available. And Eastern disciplines, come study at our ashram in northern India for 10 years. This was chronicled in my previous book, Journeys Out of the Body.
So this process or these things were not documented very well. And because they were not documented very well, no one was really being able to respond or say anything about these experiences to him, except for that story where he was told that you go to an ashram in India, sit on the feet of the near the feet of the guru for 10 to 20 years, and then you'll get information about it because they do these things regularly. Okay, apart from that, in the Western society, there was nothing written about these particular experiences or phenomenon.
One thing is certain, the purpose of the previous book was many times fulfilled. It brought thousands of letters from all parts of the world, and among them, many hundreds of people wrote their personal thanks for a reassurance that they were not mentally deranged, were not so much alone after all with their closet's secret experience that they could not explain, and most important, that they were not necessarily candidates for the psychiatric couch or mental hospital. That was the stated purpose of the original book, to help just one person avoid such needless incarceration.
So many, as it was said stated previously, up to 25% of the population, and now it may be even higher, of the population experience out of body experiences. 25 to 30% experience out of body. But because that phenomenon was not understood, number one, and there was nothing really written about it, people started thinking that they are crazy, right? And that became a big problem. Now, because it became open information after Robert Monroe's book was published, it allowed a lot of people to really understand what was the experience that they were experiencing.
I personally am bemused at the changes in these 25 years. In most academic and intellectual societies, it is now quite acceptable to talk about OOBEs. However, I am sure that the great majority of people in our culture are still unaware of this facet of their lives. In 1959 or 1960, I certainly would have derided the idea that I might give a talk on OOBEs at the Smithsonian Institution, or papers on the subject would be presented before the American Psychiatric Association, but they happened.
So,
One of the most frequent approaches
one
I
second.
hear.
Now, I don't know how many of you all have visited Washington, D.C., but the Smithsonian Institution is in Washington, D.C., and they have some of the best museums in the world over there. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., I would say you need at least 2 to 3 days just to go through those museums, or even maybe more, right? Now, having given a speech at the Smithsonian is like a huge thing. It is not something which was very, very simple. And when we are talking in the 1970s, people used to totally debunk all this. So, but now we can also talk about it. Now, having said that, even today, apart from people who are, let's say, coming to awareness of such kind of processes or organizations, if you talk to a normal person, they will still stay that you're talking of your rockers. Okay, still today also, at least in India, most people don't understand this concept at all.
One of the most frequent approaches I hear reminds me very much of the old and worn out show business routine about the question a producer usually puts to the job seeking performer. He is listening to what he knows already, that the actor appeared in The Great One in 1922, starred in Who Goes There in 1938, won the Critics' Award for his lead in Nose to Nose, and in 1949 played the role of Willie in What Makes Willie Weep. The producer interrupts and puts the very simple question: That's great, but what have you done yesterday? And so it is. What have I been doing out of body since the publication of Journeys Out of the Body? The answer I usually give is this. Beginning in the 70s, I began to experience a frustration, a limitation in my out of body activities. It is hard for some people to believe, I suppose, but such travels actually become boring. The early excitement had long passed. It became an effort to participate in controlled tests. And because it was an effort, I began to sense that the particular theme of proof was not part of my mode of operation. Moreover, when free of such testing limitations, there didn't seem to be anything exciting to do.
So what happened? Now you're keeping on doing the same thing. He's just getting out of his body. So first he went around his own house. Then he started going elsewhere and doing a little bit of investigation. Okay. Now he was focused on testing how is this happening, what is not happening. But ultimately he found it's very difficult to test it. So then he started removing the limitations of testing. Now, if you're not going to be testing, now there is nothing exciting left to do because now there's no proof. So naturally, it led to a little bit of boredom.
My deliberate inducement of the second state also became tedious because I had found a simpler way to achieve it. I would wake up after 2 or possibly 3 sleep cycles, or approximately after 3 or 4 hours, and find myself already relaxed physically, rested, and completely wide awake. In that state, I found it ridiculously easy to unhook and flow freely out of the body. This, of course, posed the question of what to do. Everyone else was asleep at 3 or 4:30 in the morning. There seemed nothing to be gained by going and meeting people while they were asleep. Not any easy prospect for validation because of the hour. So, with no particular goal or attraction, I usually would drift around a bit, then slip back in, turn on the light, read until I was sleepy again, and that was it.
So in the beginning, what used to happen was that he used to just lie down in his easy chair, and then a vibratory state used to come on, and the whole body used to feel as if it is vibrating. And then slowly the unhooking would take place. Now, that vibratory state used to take time to come on. Now, what has he developed over here? He has developed a much easier way to get out. So now he does not have to wait for that vibratory state to come in to unhook from the physical body. But again, it led to boredom, right? Now, what to do? So you have to have some kind of an intent. You have to have some kind of an intention whenever you are doing anything. So even when you are going out of body, what is your intent in that particular experience starts to kick in.
This compounded the frustration as there was still the compulsion. All of the effort to work in the outer body state had to have some meaning or importance beyond what my conscious mind or those of others thought to be important.
So now what is happening? In the workshops we constantly talk about our conscious mind, which is like this, and our subconscious mind, which is like that. So over here he is saying that the conscious mind has a lot of limitations. So it is limited by the fact of what it knows, right? So it cannot be beyond that. And anyone else also telling you is also operating from the conscious mind, so they are also limited. So how do we experience something which is beyond the conscious mind? is the game that we are playing over here.
In the spring of 1972, a decision was made that provided the answer. The limiting factor was my conscious mind. Therefore, if OOBE decisions were left up to that part of me, as they had been, I would remain just as I was. I was too much in control. This left brain I. What would happen if I turned this decision making process over to my total self, soul, who was purportedly conversant with such activities?
So when we are looking at a conscious mind over here, it is more the left brain, because the left brain is more logical. So all the stuff that we are doing normally, we have all, as a society, we have all become more left brain oriented than right brain oriented. Okay, so over here, this activity, when we are going into an expanded state of consciousness, is more the realm of the right brain or the whole brain, and not of the left brain, because the left brain operates out of only knowns, but the right brain can operate out of the gestalt or the unknown also. So because we are focused more on the left brain, these experiences become difficult to catalog, because the left brain has no ways of tagging the particular experience. So that's why we need to go into the right brain.
Believing this, I then put it into practice. The following night, I went to sleep, went through two sleep cycles, about 3 hours, woke up and remembered the decision. I detached from the physical and floated free. I said in my conscious mind that the decision to do is to be made by my entire self. After waiting for what seemed only a few seconds, there was a tremendous surge, a movement, and energy in that familiar spatial blackness. And there began for me an entire new era in my outer body activities. Since that night, my non physical experiences have been almost totally due to this procedure.
So over here, he talks about two sleep cycles. So we start with being awake, then we get drowsy, then we go into the into the dream state, and then we go into deep sleep, and then again we come back into the dream state, we become a little drowsy, and then we wake up. So you'll find that at night you will take a karvat, or you will get up to go to the restroom, or you'll get up to get have a glass of water, right? And this cycle is approximately 1.5 hours. So there is a cycle. So he's saying over here two sleep cycles, which is approximately 3 hours. And over here, he allowed his total self or his whole brain to direct the activity rather than the ego driven self directing the activity. And that's when the game actually changed. And that's the game that we are playing today.
The results have been of a nature so far removed from anything my conscious mind could conceive of that a new problem arose. Although my physical here now consciousness is always a participant, better than 90% of such events seem to be to me impossible to translate into the time space medium. It is as if one were to try to describe music, such as a symphony orchestra with choir, and do it in words without the use of such technical descriptions as notation, instruments, intervals, tonalities, and so on. One can use such words as nice, compelling, frightening, or is inspiring, warm, loving, beautiful, and be nowhere remotely near the actual description.
So when we go into these expanded states, we have to relate with these states in a new language. We have to develop a language that we can relate with these states. Now, you are developing that language in that expanded state of consciousness. Now, when you bring it back, most people over here have not experienced that state of consciousness, and they do not know that language. So, for you to be able to explain to people what is the experience you've had over there becomes literally impossible. You may use these words that they mentioned over here, nice, compelling, frightening, etc., but they do not accurately explain the exact experience. That is why in most of the Monroe processes, it is something that you have to experience. It becomes very, very difficult to explain to anyone what your experience was. And this is something which is happening to most excursion and all the other advanced programs that we've done. You cannot explain it to anyone. So if, when someone asks you, okay, what did it do for you, you can't explain it, but there are shifts which start taking place in people's lives because of attending the programs. I'm sure a lot of you will vouch for this, those who have attended the programs.
You do the best you can, which I suppose is what will happen as the attempt is made. I'm sure reporting Niagara Falls barrel cruising was easier. My here now activities posed another problem. None of the exercises and techniques I had been designing and providing for others would work for me. Psychologist friends have offered many reasons why they are ineffective in my case. The simplest one is that I just cannot get my left brain out of the way. I have been so deeply involved in the production process that my critical and analytical faculty simply won't let go of the here now attention focusing material contained therein. Also, in order to produce these exercises in an audio mode, I have had to listen with an intense form of concentration in the recording and mixing of the various sounds that we use. Evidently, I have had to shut off the effect. Even a simple one frequency tone causes me to analyze the frequency and attempt to determine that it is stable.
So over here, what is he trying to say? That because he was producing the sounds and he was wanting to equate it with his own experiences, he had to shut off the faculty which would drive him into that state of consciousness. Otherwise, he would not be able to actually do what he was doing and mix the sounds that were being created.
Perhaps there is an effect I am not aware of, but it is a strange place to be. Looking over the fence at a garden you have planted and fertilized, watching everybody else have such a good time.
So now what happened? Now people started having experiences because of the techniques that he was giving, but he himself had to create a separate system for himself to experience what experiences he was creating for others.
The here now portions of recent events are relatively straightforward. For example, I had become painfully, literally aware that my body has taken to rejecting chemicals. This includes alcohol, prescription drugs, caffeine, and evidently anything else my body says is unnatural for its operation. The rejection or allergic reaction takes the form of profuse sweating, vomiting, and or severe abdominal cramps. This may be constructive, but it also has its disadvantages. I never was a consequential drinker, but even a glass of wine begins the rejection process.
So this is related to now tamas, rajas, and sattva, right? Now, a sattvic person, if the sattvic person consumes food, etc., which are more tamasic in nature, his body or her body will start to reject it. So as we process these processes in our system, our body system at a physical, emotional, mental, as well as a spiritual level starts to get more subtle. So anything that is heavy in nature or is pulling downwards starts to get rejected by the body. I've had many people who have told me that after doing the excursion workshop, they are not able to consume liquor, right? Because now the body starts to reject it. So this has happened to quite a number of people. I don't know if anyone here has felt that, they can't consume liquor anymore after doing the excursion workshop. Is anyone there who's felt this? Okay. I know I can't consume these things in any case.
During surgery, it is something intense to cope with. I begin to reject the anesthesia and awake on the operating table to feel the surgeon sewing me up. I am sure the surprise of the anesthesiologist. In recovery under intense pain, a shot of Demerol only brings on extreme vomiting. You can imagine my frustration when others are using a system we developed that permits excellent non drug pain control in the post surgical period. In my hospital visits during the past 10 years, only once has the system worked for me. I was sorely disappointed when it was not effective on the last trip. It was a nearly unbearable event. Yet I knew if I consciously went out of body, I would not have the courage to return to that sea of scalding pain.
So we have used the surgery support series with many people. And what we have found is that the requirement of pain medication definitely drops, the recovery time improves, and the operation tends to be more successful. There is less blood loss also during the operation. This is what we found across the board with the surgery support series. And the other statement that he makes over here is important. We have also had people who have shifted their state of consciousness to manage pain. So, suppose you are having a pain, you shift into focus 10 or focus 12, and you'll find that you can manage your pain much better. So, what he's saying over here is that if I went out of body to avoid the pain, then coming back into the body would be problematic. So now pain is a very, very powerful tool in itself, because if we did not have pain, then we would not know that there is something wrong in the system that we are in our body system. Now, for example, if you take these people who have diabetes, many times they lose their feeling in their feet. Okay, there is no sensation of pain in their feet. Now, if there is a big cut on the foot, they won't even know that there is a cut. So, having pain is extremely important for us, but we need to be able to manage it so that it comes into manageable levels. And HemiSync is a very good way, or the Monroe technology is a very good way in which we can manage the pain. So I don't know, Shimangla. My dentist made a comment to Shimangla that I keep on attempting to manage the pain in my teeth, and because of that, I don't report back to her. So she was complaining. Shimangla, wasn't she saying that?
Yes, she said he can feel the pain and he should take the medicine to overcome it. Should we stop here?
You, Acha, okay.